It wasn't until 1980s that they actually interpreted the drawings that were on the cave and made it into a modern dance.
Let's talk about food. This whole trip has been this extreme culinary experience.
Earlier today, our local host here in Dunhuang, Mr. Ren, arranged a banquet for us. Each dish is very unique, but then dishes started coming out that had actual like figurines made out of roots and stories behind them, and just unbelievable. I've never seen cuisine like this before. It was fun. It was actually fun cuisine.
Kiss first.
Kiss first. Yeah.
The tastes are just divine. I can't even really compare it to a lot of food back home because I just had never really had anything like it. Eggplant was something that I had never really liked in my whole life, and here, the eggplant dishes, I can't even get enough of them. I think it might have a lot to do with the sauce, the preparations here.
We mainly were having local cuisine here in Dunhuang, and these weren't recipes that were handed down from generations from like someone's great-grandmother. These recipes came from the Mogao caves. They were in the library cave that are like 1,000 years old.
One of the things I did find out about the traditional banquets that they have here is that they do like to drink, and
you need fortitude to be able to come to these meals and be able to drink as much as you are drinking.
That stuff is wicked. And I later learned that that's part of a host's responsibilities to make sure that first of all that their guests are full to capacity and drunk.
This evening we just experienced something that's very specific and special to this area, and it was a dance performance called the Dancing Murals. The dancing murals are based on paintings from the Mogao窟, or the Mogao Caves, also known as the Dunhuang Grottos.
Many of the frescoes were made during the Tong Dynasty in the 7th century. It was a time of when art flourished. It's comparable to the Renaissance of Italy.
With the rise in trade on the Silk Road, there were so many new customs and cultures introduced into China, and Dunhuang being such a hub.
People were coming from all over, from Persia and Cambodia and India and as far west as Rome.
So these dancing murals and the artwork that was produced during these times was really influenced by all these outside variables. They would be doing their performance and dancing, and all of a sudden they would hold this pose, and those were images of paintings and different renditions of paintings from the Mogao Caves. Another one was the Buddha of 1,000 Hands, and there was these costumes and these just yellow and had these brilliant gold extensions on their fingers. Their movements are so fluid, it's almost like a brushstroke, which just completely relates back to the artwork that they're trying to portray.
Seeing the dance today was really interesting as well for me as an artist, because so far everything that's artistic here in Dunhuang has some kind of reference to the Mogao Caves, and I haven't even seen them yet. I think seeing them as performance art and as paper cuts is giving me the gravity of what they mean to this community.
We went to watch the dance rehearsal for the dancing murals this morning, and I was able to do some sketching while they were holding some poses. And it was kind of one of the first times since I've been here that I felt like my sketching as far as figurative that I was getting a handle on that kind of thing. And I could actually produce them and put them on paper and be able to relate some of the forms and actions and movements that some of the dancers were doing. So as an artist, moments like that happen, it feels good.
We had to get a girl at 4. It's 12:15. So we can go ride camels. I love camels. I'm excited.
This morning we went back to the sand dunes at Echoing Sand Mountain, where we were the first day on our journey here. It was a pretty early start today, and we were on the backs of our camels by about 5:30 a.m. heading through the desert.
One of the things I was so excited about coming to China for was the camels. I wanted to ride camels. Being there at that time of the night and being on camels kind of gave me a feeling of what it might have been like to be in a caravan. A lot of the caravans that went across the Silk Road would travel at nighttime to avoid the desert sun, the harshness of the desert. The reason why we went so early in the morning was because we wanted to make sure that we could catch the sunrise over the dunes.
Before the sun rises, the light is very flat, and you don't really see a lot of the definition in your surroundings. We started to see the sun come up over some of the clouds that were there, and it was these brilliant reds and oranges, and it reminded me so much of a lot of the paintings that I do in the Smoke and Fire series, because there was parts of the sky that literally just looked like they were on fire. So as the sun starts to rise and you get more light, everything starts to get so much more definition, and just everything that is in the desert that was just kind of hidden at one point in time just starts to come out at you.
The Silk Road is an ancient trading route that connected China to many other countries. The distance of the Silk Road was roughly 4,300 miles, and that's the diameter of the core of the Earth.
I had the opportunity today to do an on-site painting in the sand dunes. I had an idea in my mind of what I had wanted to paint after being here for a little while though, and while we were out in the area, I started scouting out a spot and was able to actually find an old tree that had looked like it had been there forever. One of the things that I do in my paintings is create my own colors, and we had this brilliant blue sky today, but as you can see here, I decided I wanted to change that a little bit, give it more my own style, and try to pull something out of it that I could see.
The image I chose to paint is a building only a couple decades old, but it replaced a temple that was 1,000 years old. It's a building that sits on the Crescent Moon Lake, just at the foot of the dunes. The reason I chose to paint it was the subtleties in the color. It was a bit challenging for me because there wasn't, as far as the palette's concerned, there wasn't very much range. But ultimately, I feel very pleased with it. I think that there are some subtleties that I'm proud of, although I could probably only pick out about this much of a space that I like, which is this right here. And I think that if I would have had maybe a little more shade, maybe another hour, I could have gotten it to another level. So I'm a little disappointed, but ultimately I have a painting now, and I'm happy about that. Today was such a great day, and we did so much, and I was exhausted because I only had an hour of sleep last night. But I find that the closer I come to the end of this trip, the more I have to think about, and the harder it is to sleep.
I'm really looking forward to going to the grottos tomorrow. It's just been, I think everything that we've learned throughout this whole trip has just built up to this point. After seeing and hearing so much about the murals in the Mogao caves, we finally made it here today. Some of these caves have actually been around since the 4th century, but the first cave we came to was built around the 9th century and was restored sometime in the 11th century. As we were entering, there was another cave that was just inside on the right hand. And this particular cave is very special to this whole area. They call it the Library Cave, and it had actually been sealed off for 1,000 years.
The find of this secret cave is important to the history of the Mogao Caves because it was the first time that the modern world gave any attention to the caves here in Dunhuang. In 1900, the monk who was protecting the caves during this time discovered a secret room that contained thousands of ancient Chinese documents.
Starting around 1907, Ariel Stein, an explorer, after hearing about this discovery, came here to China and actually went through and bartered for a lot of the treasures in these artworks and scrolls and manuscripts that were inside this cave. And it was able to bring a lot of these back to Britain.
Well, the space in the first cave was so enormous, and there was just these echoes of Buddhas repeated, and I think they were made with stencils because they were very, very accurate, that it was a very interesting and almost unnerving experience for me. This is the largest cave in the grottos, and it actually has 2 layers of painting. In the 9th century, there was the original, and then it was painted over in the 11th century by a minority group. So not only were the caves built out of the cliffs here, all the freestanding sculptures and the high reliefs were built out of the same material.
On the ceiling here, there's a really beautiful bird, and I guess in Buddhism it's called the bird with golden wings. It kind of looks similar to a phoenix, but on the image you can actually see also that there's dragons around it. And the guide was just telling me that this bird was one that could actually defeat dragons.
The second cave we visited today was made during the 6th century, which was the Tong Dynasty. Tong Dynasty was a time of when art flourished and there was a lot of money and commerce coming through Dunhuang. Initially, I was very overwhelmed by the illustrations on the walls. They were very busy and they depicted the life of Buddha. In Buddhism, one lives many different lives and is reincarnated until they can achieve a state of enlightenment.
The second cave we came to, I was actually really, really impressed with, and I could sort of relate to some of the artwork in there because there was some of it that almost reminded me of some contemporary art. I think Picasso may have visited this cave and got some inspiration from some of these paintings on the walls here. Some of the figures and the lines that they used were really similar in style to things that I've seen used in European art and things like that.
These characters are very animated. I'm surprised how much line is used in the paintings. Nothing like the Renaissance. The sculptures that I was actually drawing were so much out of proportion that it made me recognize the fact that maybe there was a bit of Greek influence, because the head of the sculptures were so large and the feet were smaller. From a viewer's angle looking up, the head is in complete and perfect proportion with the rest of the body.
Another really cool part of this cave that I was able to see was they had images of these flying angels, and most of these were on the ceiling. These were images and paintings that we'd actually seen in town. When we visited the woman that did the paper cuts and things like that, she had done these images. And so I think it's sort of a special image to all the people in this area. And so it was really kind of cool to see those and relate it to some of the other things that I've seen. Because I've been looking forward to seeing the actual images ever since we arrived here in China.
When I first walked in here, I didn't really know what to expect, and I was looking at the floor and the walls around, and all of a sudden when I looked up, it really caught me by surprise. I was like, wow, it's such a huge statue. It's just a gigantic relief sculpture of Buddha, and it's just kind of standing against the wall, but you really have to look straight up at the statue in order to see it, because the room that it's in is actually really based just specifically around the statue.
When I walked into this building, all I could see was Buddha and the beautiful decorations on his folded clothing.
The features in this Buddha were a little more simple, and the face just like a happy Buddha that was just kind of sitting there. A structure had been built around this because the original one had actually fallen down in an earthquake. So this Buddha had been open to the elements for many years until 1920, when they actually built the new facade for that particular cave, which is actually this central building right here.
The last cave we visited today was built during the 8th century. This cave has the second largest Buddha, standing about 90 feet tall.
This Buddha had a lot more detail, and the hands, as they were sitting one was sitting up and the other one was kind of hanging down over the edge of one of its knees, and it's just, the lines were so delicate.
One thing that's known about this particular Buddha is that it has one of the most beautiful rendered hands, its left hand. I thought it was very interesting because the fingernails actually curl up. But what got my attention was its right hand. The right hand had actually been restored, and they restored it so that it was very simple and only preserved it and kept it from falling down.
The head of this particular Buddha is a quarter or 1/4 of the size of the rest of the body. So the head is actually much bigger than the rest of it. In looking up, it helps put the whole thing into perspective. So when we're looking up, you can actually still see the facial features.
I think a cool thing that I found out about it was how they actually built it and how they started. Because where it started was about midway up where the Buddha is. They dug a cave going in, and then they dug down, and then they dug up. So they actually dug the cave from the middle point. And then from there, they pulled out the general structure as a relief away from the wall of what the Buddha was going to look like. And then they added over top of that the different layers of detail, which consisted of straw and clays and plasters before they put on the actual paint.
Later in the afternoon, I was able to sit in front of the entrance of the Mogao Caves and do a little painting. I have this issue with painting architecture, especially architecture that is so beautiful and interesting. I'd rather just take a picture. And I was definitely challenged by this particular structure because it's so, like, every piece of it is art.
Today, after seeing the artwork here and the way that the feel and the way things were painted, I felt like I wanted to maybe emulate some of those styles and just using, pen and ink in the way that they may have painted back then.
This is a very highly populated area, tons of traffic, tourists, just people hanging around. It kind of got to me to have herds of people standing behind me as I painted. The second I can take myself out of it, my ego out of the experience, I enjoyed it so much more.
was so cool to actually be able to see this artwork that was created so long ago.
The things I've been seeing here make me realize how small I am in this whole, timeline of history. And I mean, I would have to make something pretty incredible. I mean, these caves were covered and not even looked at for 1,000 years. I can't imagine as an artist ever creating something that could mean that much to such a large group of people.
Today we return to the grottos to look at a few more caves. The first cave that we went to was cave number 11, and it was built during the 9th century.
As we came in, there was a statue of a Buddha in the center and was surrounded by murals that basically showed him in his nirvana, and then all the other Buddhas that were around him and what they were doing with their lives in his nirvana.
Looking at the cave, I didn't consider it as anything vibrant or complex.